Have you noticed how life can suddenly stop making sense? One day you're moving along, checking off the boxes, working, talking, laughing, chasing the same routines as everyone else, and then out of nowhere it all feels empty. The conversations feel flat, the work feels pointless, the plans you once clung to now feel like they belong to someone else's life, not yours. And in that moment, you can't explain it, but deep down, you know something has shifted. This isn't just boredom or burnout, it's not laziness, and it's not you being ungrateful. What you're feeling is the first crack in the surface of the life you were told to live. It's the whisper that the world you've been running through on autopilot might not be real in the way you thought it was. That whisper unsettles everything. It makes the familiar feel foreign and the predictable feel hollow. Maybe you've tried to shake it off. You tell yourself you should be fine. After all, everyone else seems fine. They're chasing promotions, posting their happy updates, filling their schedules. But while they're busy running faster, you're standing still, staring at the track, wondering why you were running in the first place. That stillness feels like disorientation, but it's actually the first glimpse of truth breaking through. And here's what most people never tell you. That confusion, that emptiness, that strange detachment from the life that used to fit you is not a breakdown. It's an awakening. The very fact that you feel out of place means you've outgrown the cage you've been living in. You're not failing at life, you're simply beginning to see that the game was never yours to play. At first, this realization doesn't come with clarity or peace. It comes with chaos. It feels like losing your balance, like everything you thought was solid has been ripped from under your feet. And that's exactly how it's supposed to feel. Because before you can see clearly, the old illusions have to fall apart. And that's where the real journey begins, in the moment when nothing makes sense anymore. But if confusion is the doorway, then what waits on the other side? When awakening begins, it rarely looks like light, bliss, or instant peace. In fact, it often feels like the complete opposite. It feels like your identity is melting away, like you're being pulled out of the life you thought was yours, and you can't make sense of why. The job you once cared about suddenly feels meaningless. The conversations that used to distract you now feel shallow. The goals you spent years chasing no longer move you. And while everyone else seems to keep running in the same direction, you're standing there with a growing sense that you can't keep pretending.
This stage is disorienting because society has conditioned you to equate confusion with failure. We're told that if we're not certain, if we don't have a 5-year plan, if we're not busy chasing something, then we're falling behind. But the truth is, awakening doesn't happen on society's schedule. It has its own rhythm, and it doesn't care about your resume, your reputation, or what anyone else thinks. Awakening pulls you into silence when the world demands noise. It makes you stop moving when everyone else insists you keep running. And that can make you feel like you're breaking apart. But here's what you need to know. You're not breaking down, you're breaking free. The heaviness you feel is the weight of conditioning being stripped away. The confusion you feel is your soul adjusting to truth after a lifetime of illusion. Think of it like waking up in a dark room you've lived in for years. At first, the sudden light is blinding. You squint, you stumble, you reach for the old familiar shadows. But once your eyes adjust, you begin to see clearly for the very first time. That disorientation was not failure. It was the necessary shock of seeing reality without the mask. And yes, it's uncomfortable. Awakening feels like being pulled out of everything safe and familiar. But it's only because life is preparing to rebuild you on a foundation that actually belongs to you. You're not falling apart. You're being undone so the truth can take its place. This is the part most people never talk about, the stage where nothing makes sense. But it's also the stage that matters most, because it's here where you finally stop living the lie. And once you realize that, you begin to see the cracks in the world around you in a way you can never unsee again. As the layers of illusion begin to peel away, you notice something unsettling. The world you once belonged to doesn't feel like home anymore. You sit in meetings and wonder why everyone is so invested in numbers, deadlines, and titles that suddenly feel meaningless to you. You go out with friends and find yourself zoning out, questioning why the same small talk feels so empty when your heart is craving depth, truth, and silence. It's not that you've become antisocial, it's that your soul no longer tolerates what isn't real. This is one of the hardest parts of awakening, because while you're starting to see through the surface, many of the people around you are still asleep. They're still running the program, repeating the script, chasing goals they never questioned. And when you stop playing along, it makes them uncomfortable. They might call you negative, lazy, or even broken. They'll encourage you to distract yourself, to get over it, to go back to being who you were. But deep down, you know, you can't go back. You can't unsee what you've seen.
And so the distance grows. Friends you once laughed with now drain your energy. Crowds that once excited you now overwhelm you. You begin to crave nature more than nightlife, solitude more than noise. What feels like emptiness is actually clarity. What feels like isolation is actually freedom. Because in the stillness, you're discovering a truth that most people spend their lives avoiding. Peace doesn't come from adding more. It comes from letting go of what was never real. Of course, there's grief here too. A grieving for the old version of you who once felt at home in the game. A grieving for the dreams you now realize were never yours. A grieving for the comfort of fitting in. This grief is real and heavy, but it's also sacred, because it's proof that you are shedding what no longer serves you. You are stepping into the unknown, raw, vulnerable, but finally honest with yourself. And this is where awakening starts to reveal its power, not in grand revelations, but in the quiet knowing that even if you lose everything familiar, you're gaining something far greater, the truth of who you really are. The deeper you move into awakening, the more you realize that confusion is not your enemy, it is your teacher. Nothing makes sense anymore because the false structures you used to lean on are crumbling. The career path that once gave you security now feels hollow. The relationships built on convenience or comfort no longer resonate. Even your own habits and patterns start to feel foreign, as if they belonged to a stranger. It feels chaotic, almost like your life is dissolving in front of your eyes. But here's the truth. It's not falling apart. It's being rebuilt from the ground up. Think of it like a house you've been living in for years. The walls are cracked, the foundation is weak, and yet you've decorated it, filled it with furniture, pretended it was strong enough to last. Awakening is the storm that comes to shake it all down. And yes, it's terrifying to watch the walls collapse, but deep in your soul you know this. The old structure wasn't meant to hold the weight of who you're becoming. This is why awakening often feels like chaos, because the programming you've lived by, the rules of success, the definitions of love, the sense of identity, are being stripped away. Your soul is demanding authenticity, and authenticity requires that the false layers die so the real can emerge. That's why you feel like a stranger to yourself. That's why the hobbies you once loved feel empty. Why the conversations that once thrilled you now feel flat. Your soul has turned down the volume on the noise so you can finally hear what's underneath. And here's the paradox. The very confusion that makes you feel lost is the doorway to clarity. Because in the silence that follows, you'll notice the faint voice of your soul whispering truths you've ignored for years. At first, it's unsettling to stand in this in-between space, no longer who you were, but not yet fully who you're becoming. But this space is sacred. It is the womb of transformation, where the old dissolves and the new begins to take shape. So if you feel like nothing makes sense anymore, don't fight it.
Don't rush to patch the cracks or force everything back into order. Let the structures fall. Let the confusion swirl. Let yourself grieve what's ending, because beneath that collapse is the foundation of your true life waiting to be built. And the only way forward is through. One of the hardest truths about awakening is that it doesn't just change your relationship with yourself, it changes your relationship with the world around you. The moment you begin to see through the illusion, the distance between you and others can grow wider. Friends who once made you laugh now feel draining. Social gatherings that once filled your weekends feel meaningless. Even conversations that used to excite you can sound hollow, as if everyone is reading from a script while you're suddenly aware of the stage. And in that awareness, loneliness creeps in. It's not that you suddenly dislike people, it's that your soul is craving depth while the world is still comfortable with surfaces. You long for silence, for truth, for connection beyond small talk. But not everyone is ready to meet you there. This is where many people mistake awakening for depression, because the things that used to light you up no longer spark joy. But this isn't emptiness, it's clarity. You're no longer distracted by what isn't real, so naturally, everything false begins to fade. And yet, that fading feels like loss. You grieve the version of yourself who fit neatly into groups, who could laugh without thinking too much, who felt safe inside the game everyone else was playing. You grieve the dreams you thought were yours, but now realize were handed to you by society. You grieve the ease of belonging, even if it meant wearing a mask. This grief is heavy, and it can convince you that you're broken, that something's wrong with you. But grief in this context is sacred. It's your soul clearing space. It's your heart saying, there is no going back, but there is more ahead. And here's the beauty buried in the loneliness. The more you release what no longer serves you, the more space you create for what truly belongs. You'll start to notice new people entering your life, people whose energy feels familiar even if you've just met. Conversations with strangers may carry more meaning than years with old friends. Synchronicities, repeating numbers, unexpected signs, perfectly timed moments begin to appear, reminding you that you're not alone in this shift. The universe has a way of filling the gaps once you dare to let go of what no longer fits. So, if you find yourself in that empty space where nothing feels the same and no one seems to understand, don't panic. That emptiness is not a void, it's a clearing. And in time, that clearing becomes fertile ground for a deeper, truer kind of connection. The more you surrender to this process, the more you begin to realize that awakening is not about finding all the answers at once. It's about learning to live inside the questions. Society trains us to plan, to predict, to measure progress in neat milestones. But awakening pulls you into a rhythm that doesn't obey the clock or the calendar. Some days you feel alive and lit from within. Other days you feel numb, confused, even broken. And it's easy to panic in those moments, to think you're moving backward. But the truth is, awakening is not a straight line. It's a spiral. You revisit the same wounds, the same doubts, the same fears, not to suffer them again, but to see them from a higher vantage point each time. Think of it like climbing a mountain in wide circles. From one angle, the view looks familiar. You might even mistake it for being stuck. But when you look closely, you're standing higher than before. That's how growth often feels. Confusing, repetitive, but always ascending, always bringing you to the summit of your true self. This is also where trust becomes essential. The mind will scream for certainty. Where is this going? How long will this last? What if I never feel normal again? But the soul whispers something softer. You don't need to see the whole map. Just take the next step. Awakening asks you to trade control for faith, to stop forcing clarity and start trusting the unknown. And yes, that feels terrifying at first. Control has been your safety net, but control was also your cage. The moment you release the need to micromanage your journey, something shifts. Life starts to flow again.
You notice that not everything has to be figured out. You can allow experiences to unfold, people to come and go, lessons to reveal themselves in time. And little by little, you begin to see that what felt like chaos was actually guidance. Every loss pushed you closer to truth. Every confusion stripped away illusion. Every pause was preparing you for something more. So if you're in that spiral right now, revisiting the same patterns, circling through the same emotions, don't mistake it for failure. It's evolution in disguise. And the deeper you surrender to it, the more you realize you're not unraveling. You're being rewoven into something stronger, freer, more aligned with who you've always been beneath the noise. One day, all the confusion you're carrying right now will no longer feel like a curse. It will make sense as the very path that brought you back to yourself. You'll look at the emptiness you once feared and realize it wasn't emptiness at all, but space. Space where old illusions dissolved, space where new clarity could finally take root. The silence that unnerved you will become your teacher. The stillness that felt unbearable will become your sanctuary. And the identity you thought you were losing will be revealed as something you never needed to hold on to in the first place. Awakening doesn't hand you a brand new life overnight. It strips away what isn't real so you can finally live the life that has been waiting underneath. That's why nothing makes sense in the beginning, because the old sense was borrowed, programmed, false. And when it falls apart, of course it feels like chaos. But slowly, gently, that chaos clears. And what remains is you. Raw, real, unshakable. So breathe. You're not broken. You're not behind. You're not crazy. You're awakening. And while the world may never fully understand, your soul does. That's enough. In fact, that's everything. And here's where I want to challenge you. Don't just let this message wash over you and disappear. Pause for a moment. Ask yourself, what in my life no longer feels real? What am I being asked to release? Write it down, reflect on it, share it. Because your story might be the exact reminder someone else needs to know they're not alone in their awakening. If this spoke to you, make sure you subscribe, leave a comment about what part of your journey resonates most, and share this with someone who might need it. Together, we can create a space where awakening isn't something to hide, but something to honor. Because in the end, the more each of us remembers who we are, the more the world itself begins to wake up.